The first rule everyone learned about the Aurelius was simple and absolute. Do not touch them. Not with your hands, not with tools, not with containment fields tuned too close to their molecular cohesion. Touch, according to every xenological text ever approved by the Galactic Council, caused irreversible psychological collapse in gaseous life forms, madness at best, dissolution at worst. That belief had survived 3,000 cycles without challenge, reinforced by warnings etched into docking bay walls and medical protocols stamped with red extinction-level risk markers. So when the containment alarm screamed across orbital station Helios 9 and the Aurelius envoy began to unravel in open, vacuum-adapted air, no one moved. They watched. They always watched. The being known as Salith hovered at the center of the diplomatic chamber, once a stable lattice of shimmering vapor threaded with bioluminescent currents, now breaking apart into turbulent spirals that slammed against the containment field like a storm trying to tear itself apart. The chamber lights flickered as Salith's electromagnetic coherence spiked and dipped erratically. Counselors from 12 species recoiled instinctively, tendrils pulling back, armored plates sealing, ocular membranes tightening in fear. The translator array crackled as Salith's voice fractured into overlapping harmonics filled with pain and panic and something far worse than physical distress. This was not an attack. This was not sabotage. This was an accident, a microfracture in the containment lattice caused by a routine power fluctuation, a minor error, the kind that happened every day across the galaxy. Except today, it was happening to a species that could not be touched. Medical drones hovered uselessly at a mandated distance, their instruments unable to penetrate the destabilized field without making direct contact. Automated systems calculated survival probabilities in cold, cascading numbers that dropped with every passing second. 38%, 24, 12, 5. The chamber filled with the sound of warning tones and the unspoken certainty that Salith was dying in front of them. The Aurelius delegation, normally serene and diffuse, pulsed with frantic color patterns that broadcast collective terror. Their cultural observers transmitted the same message over and over to the council feed. Intervention forbidden. Physical contact equals identity collapse. Let them dissipate with dignity. Let them return to the atmospheric currents of their homeworld as myth demanded. Better extinction than violation. The council hesitated. They always did when protocol and survival collided. And then a human stood up. Lieutenant Jonah Mercer had not been invited to speak. Humans rarely were during high-level xeno-diplomatic sessions. They were observers, advisors, useful but dangerous mammals whose emotional volatility made other species nervous. Mercer had been assigned to Helios 9 as a systems engineer, not a medic, not a diplomat. He was there to listen, to learn, to keep quiet. He did none of those things. He felt at first the wrongness of the moment, the silence, the waiting, the way everyone was choosing rules over a life. He had seen this before on Earth, in disaster zones where people stood back because the handbook told them to. He had seen what happened when no one reached out. Salith's form collapsed inward, luminous filaments snapping like dying stars. The translator spat out a fragment of thought that cut through Mercer like a blade. I am coming apart. I am alone. Mercer didn't ask permission. He didn't look at the council. He didn't consult the data streaming across his WIS display, screaming warnings in 6 languages. He moved. The containment field flared as he crossed its boundary, alarms escalating instantly. A dozen voices shouted at once, security forces raising weapons calibrated to stun, not kill, but Mercer barely registered them. He reached the center of the chamber where Salith's form writhed, unstable and thinning, and without hesitation he extended his bare hands into the luminous storm. Gas met flesh. Every xenological model predicted collapse. Every counselor expected screaming, insanity, dissolution. What happened instead made the chamber go silent. Salith's spiraling form stuttered, then slowed. The violent turbulence dampened as Mercer's hands moved through the vapor with deliberate care, not grasping, not restraining, but steadying, like cupping water without trying to own it. The bioluminescence shifted from frantic reds and whites to a deep, stunned blue. The translator array reinitialized with a sharp chirp. Contact registered, psychological cascade halted, identity coherence stabilizing. Mercer felt it then, a strange pressure against his skin, like warmth and static combined, a presence pressing back, not with force, but awareness. He swallowed hard, heart pounding, every instinct screaming that he had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. He spoke anyway, voice low, steady, the way he'd been trained to speak to frightened people back home. "You're not alone. I've got you. Just breathe." He didn't know if Salith understood words. He knew humans did, and sometimes that was enough. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Security officers froze, weapons useless. Scientists shouted that this was impossible. The airless delegation pulsed with shock so intense their color patterns nearly overloaded the visual sensors. Protocols were violated faster than anyone could log them. And yet, Salith did not collapse. Salith did not dissolve. Salith held. The containment field recalibrated around Mercer's arms as emergency systems struggled to adapt to a scenario no one had ever planned for. Medical drones moved closer, now guided by Mercer's physical presence anchoring the gaseous form. Vital coherence climbed from 5% to 9, then 14. The numbers climbed slowly, painfully, but they climbed. Somewhere in the chaos, the station's archival AI began recording the event under a provisional tag reserved for anomalies that would one day rewrite textbooks. Mercer's breathing slowed as he focused on maintaining steady movement, resisting the urge to pull back when Salith's form fluctuated sharply. He felt fear, real fear, the kind that told him he might be dying, that his lungs might fill with something not meant for them, that his nervous system might be unraveling molecule by molecule. He stayed anyway, because leaving felt worse. In that moment, with alarms blaring and alien eyes locked on him, Mercer became acutely aware that millions were watching through delayed feeds across the galaxy. He imagined future listeners hearing this story, leaning closer, needing to know what happened next, and he wondered distantly if this was how legends started, not with confidence, but with someone too stubborn to step back. Salith's form collapsed inward, luminous filaments snapping like dying stars. The translator spat out a fragment of thought that cut through Mercer like a blade. "I am coming apart. I am alone." Mercer didn't ask permission. He didn't look at the council. He didn't consult the data streaming across his wrist display, screaming warnings in 6 languages. He moved. The containment field flared as he crossed its boundary, alarms escalating instantly. A dozen voices shouted at once, security forces raising weapons calibrated to stun, not kill, but Mercer barely registered them. He reached the center of the chamber where Salith's form writhed, unstable and thinning, and without hesitation he extended his bare hands into the luminous storm. Gas met flesh.
The darkness did not arrive all at once. It crept in through the edges of the chamber as emergency power rerouted and failed and rerouted again, lights dimming to a deep red that painted every face with the color of warning and blood. The containment field screamed as its harmonics slipped out of phase, and Mercer felt Salith's presence shudder violently against his skin, the one steady pressure turning erratic, thinning, threatening to tear away. The air itself seemed to vibrate with panic as station-wide alerts cascaded through the network. Hull breach warnings, power failure in multiple sectors, external energy surge, origin unknown. This wasn't just a system error anymore. This was something else. Mercer tightened his stance, boots braced against the deck plating, as if Salith were a physical weight he could hold in place by force alone. He couldn't. He knew that, but instinct didn't care. He'd spent his life reaching out when things fell apart, and his body remembered that better than any training. Salith's light flickered, colors flashing through the spectrum in rapid, chaotic pulses that hurt to look at. The translator struggled, fragments of sensation bleeding through instead of words. Fear, disorientation,
a vast ancestral warning echoing through Salith's consciousness like a bell struck too hard. Mercer felt it seep into him through contact, a cold certainty that something beyond the chamber had become aware of them. The council chamber door slammed shut automatically as lockdown protocols engaged, sealing them in with the failing containment field and whatever had just brushed against the station's sensors. The council chair's voice cracked through the chaos, demanding status updates, demanding explanations, demanding control. None came. The station AI responded with a delay that stretched a fraction of a second too long to be comforting. Unknown energy signature detected, classification pending, probability of hostile intent undetermined. Mercer didn't like that word. Undetermined usually meant someone was about to die. Salith's voice cut through the noise, clearer now, but edged with something ancient and afraid. "It is them." Mercer swallowed. Them who? The question didn't come out as words. It passed through touch, through the shared field between them that shouldn't exist and yet did. The Keepers. Salith's light dimmed as the concept pressed itself into Mercer's mind. Those who watch, those who forbade touch, those who taught us to fear connection because they feared what it would awaken. Mercer's heart slammed against his ribs. Around them, counselors reacted in waves of alarm as their own cultural databases flagged the term. The Keepers were a myth shared across multiple civilizations, ancient observers rumored to intervene when certain evolutionary thresholds were crossed. Most species dismissed them as folklore, a convenient explanation for unexplained disappearances and sudden cultural taboos. Humans had their own versions: gods, watchers, architects. Mercer had never believed in them. He believed in hands and effort and people choosing to help each other, even when it hurt. Salith's form convulsed as another surge rippled through the containment field, and Mercer felt something tug at the connection between them, testing it like fingers probing a wound. The external energy signature spiked again, this time focused, precise, not random, targeted. The station AI finally caught up, its voice stripped of inflection as it delivered the kind of update that made rooms go quiet. Source localized, non-corporeal entity interfacing with containment lattice, intent assessment shifting toward hostile intervention. The Keepers were not watching anymore. They were acting. Mercer's vision swam as pressure built around his skull, a sensation like standing too close to a massive engine. He tasted metal. Salith's fear intensified, but beneath it, something new stirred: anger, resolve. "We were never meant to be weak," Salith transmitted, the thought carrying the weight of generations. "We were taught to disperse, to avoid contact, to remain diffuse so we could be guided, controlled." Mercer clenched his jaw. Yeah, humans had heard that song before. Don't gather, don't organize, don't touch, don't care too much. It keeps you manageable. He shifted his grip, moving his hands with deliberate slowness, creating a stable pattern Salith could anchor to. Around them, security officers hesitated, unsure whether to pull Mercer away or defend him, unsure whether touching him now would make things worse. The council was paralyzed, caught between reverence for ancient warnings and the undeniable evidence unfolding in front of them. The containment field flared violently as an unseen force attempted to sever the connection. Mercer tried out as pain lanced up his arms, nerves screaming, muscles locking as if gripped by an invisible vice. Salith's light flared in response, not in panic this time, but defiance. The translator struggled, then stabilized, Salith's voice resonating with a clarity that silenced even the alarms. "We are not broken by touch. We are completed by touch." The containment field shattered. Energy rippled outward in a shockwave that knocked everyone off their feet and plunged the chamber into silence. For a heartbeat, Mercer felt nothing at all. No pain, no pressure, just warmth. Then gravity returned with a vengeance as he slammed onto the deck, air driven from his lungs. He lay there gasping, vision swimming, unsure if he was alive or if this was what dissolution felt like. Slowly, shapes resolved. The chamber was a wreck. Consoles sparked. Counselors lay stunned. The containment field was gone entirely. And hovering above Mercer, stable, luminous and whole, was Salith, not contained, not restrained, free. Salith looked different now, their form more defined, light patterns intricate and intentional, no longer diffuse. They extended a portion of themselves downward, hesitating only a fraction of a second before making contact again, gentle this time, reassuring. Mercer felt it and laughed weakly, tears leaking from the corners of his eyes. "Guess we proved something," he murmured. Salith's response carried awe and fear in equal measure. "We have awakened something." Across the station, sensors screamed as space itself seemed to ripple, a vast presence stirring beyond the hull, no longer content to watch from the dark. The keepers were coming in force.
The stars outside Helios 9 bent, not metaphorically, not as a sensor glitch or a trick of perspective. They bent like reflections in disturbed water, light curving inward toward a point of impossible density that formed just beyond the station's outer hull. Every long-range sensor saturated instantly, data streams collapsing into static as the station AI attempted to process a phenomenon that violated multiple physical constants at once. The keepers were no longer an abstract pressure or a distant manipulation. They were arriving. Mercer lay on the deck, chest heaving, every nerve ending still buzzing from the feedback of broken containment fields and alien contact. He felt Solid's presence above him, steady and anchoring, their light casting long shadows across the ruined chamber. Around them, counselors struggled to rise, fear rippling through the room as cultural memory and instinct collided with undeniable reality. This was what their myths warned about: intervention, correction. The station AI found its voice again, stripped of anything resembling comfort. Massive, non-baryonic structures detected. Count indeterminate. Energy output exceeds known classifications. Probability of hostile engagement approaching certainty. The council chair stared at the distorted stars with something like religious terror. The keepers had not been seen in living memory. Entire civilizations rose and fell under the assumption that these entities either did not exist or would never return. Their arrival now, in response to one human reaching out, shattered the fragile illusion that the galaxy controlled its own destiny. Salith's light pulsed slowly, deliberately, a visible effort to maintain composure. They transmitted directly to Mercer, bypassing the translators now that the connection between them had deepened into something intimate and unmistakable. "They are afraid." Mercer blinked up at them, forcing himself to sit despite the ache screaming through his muscles. "Of us." Salith's response carried a strange, dawning clarity. "Of what we become when we connect." Mercer pushed himself to his feet, unsteady but upright, and followed Salith's gaze toward the viewport where reality itself seemed to strain. He felt very small in that moment, a single human standing between ancient powers and a truth they did not want exposed. He'd always known humanity was underestimated. He hadn't known it was feared on this scale. Emergency comms crackled as voices from across the station demanded explanations. Human crew members shouted warnings and questions, their fear tempered by something fiercer: resolve. The council chair turned toward Mercer, their voice trembling with barely contained fury. "You have doomed us. You have violated ancient law and summoned extinction." Mercer wiped blood from his lip and shook his head slowly. "No, we didn't summon them. We caught their attention. Big difference." Outside, the warped stars coalesced into shapes that hurt to look at, vast geometries that suggested form without committing to it, like ideas pretending to be objects. The keepers did not enter normal space so much as impose themselves upon it. The station shuddered as gravitational forces spiked and fell in impossible rhythms.
Salith flared brighter, their form expanding slightly as if drawing strength from proximity, from the shared field that now extended between them and Mercer and faintly others. The keepers spoke without sound, their message slamming into every mind in the chamber with crushing weight. Separation is necessary. Connection is contamination. Order must be preserved. Mercer staggered as the words pressed into him, images flashing of civilizations kept docile by distance, of species taught to fear intimacy, of touch weaponized as taboo so that unity could never form. He understood then. The keepers were not guardians, they were wardens. They did not fear violence or rebellion, they feared empathy. They feared what happened when beings stopped seeing themselves as isolated units and started seeing each other as extensions of self. Salith transmitted directly to Mercer, bypassing the translators now that the connection between them had deepened into something intimate and unmistakable. Warmth, presence, the undeniable awareness that no one in that chamber was alone. The keepers recoiled. The warped starlight outside the viewport trembled, geometries flickering as if destabilized by something as simple and as dangerous as mutual recognition. The council erupted into shouting as species with centuries of rivalry suddenly felt each other's fear and confusion bleed through the fading resonance Salith had triggered.
Panic and revelation collided, ancient prejudices cracking under the strain. Mercer steadied himself against a console, breathing hard. He realized with a jolt that humans weren't immune to this effect. The faint echo of connection rippled through the human crew as well, tightening bonds that already existed, amplifying the instinct to protect, to stand together. The keeper's presence surged again, more aggressive now, pressure building like a tidal wave poised to crush the station flat. Cease, withdraw, disconnect, or be erased. The threat was absolute, backed by power beyond comprehension. The council chair slumped, despair hollowing their voice. We cannot fight them. No weapon can reach them. Mercer met Salith's gaze. Then we don't fight them. Salith tilted, light patterns shifting in curiosity. We show them. Mercer turned toward the viewport, toward the impossible shapes pressing closer. His voice was raw but carried, amplified by the station's comms as human engineers rerouted power without orders, trusting him on instinct alone. You want separation because it keeps us predictable, he said, every word deliberate. You want us isolated, afraid of touch, afraid of connection, because connection changes us. The keeper's response was immediate and violent. A surge of force slammed into the station, hurling Mercer against the console and sending sparks cascading through the chamber. Hull integrity alarms screamed as fractures raced along the outer plating. Salith cried out, their light flickering as the shared field strained under the assault. Mercer tasted blood again, pain blooming across his back, but he forced himself upright, gripping the edge of the console as if sheer stubbornness could anchor reality. We're not your experiment, he continued, voice hoarse. We're not your property. You don't get to decide how we evolve. The humans across the station responded as one, voices rising through open channels, not in panic, but in affirmation. They shared stories, names, memories, fragments of lives that made them more than data points. The resonance grew stronger, subtle but undeniable, as human connection fed Salith's field, and Salith's field fed back, amplifying what was already there. The keepers hesitated. For the first time, uncertainty rippled through their vast presence. The warped starlight flickered erratically as their structures struggled to compensate for a variable they could not suppress: collective will. Salith's voice emerged, steady and resolute. We were told touch would end us. Instead, it revealed us. The pressure intensified again, but it lacked the precision of before, anger bleeding through control. The keepers pushed harder, tearing at the station's structure, forcing systems offline, gravity fluctuating wildly. One of the outer hull segments gave way with a shriek of metal, venting atmosphere into the void.
Emergency fields snapped into place just in time, but the message was clear. The keepers were done negotiating. Mercer felt fear claw up his spine, cold and sharp. He knew they couldn't win a war of force. He also knew humans had never been good at accepting the terms set by something bigger than them. He looked at Salith, then at the shattered council chamber, then at the stars bending under ancient control. Then he made a choice that would echo across the galaxy. He reached out again. Not just to Salith, but through the comms, through the resonance, inviting every human on the station to do the same, to focus not on fear, but on connection, on the simple act of acknowledging another being's existence. Hands touched shoulders, voices steadied, hearts synchronized. The resonance surged, uncontrolled but powerful, rippling outward beyond the station, a beacon of shared presence that lit up the dark. The keepers reeled as the wave washed over them, their structures destabilizing under the strain of something they could not isolate or contain. Space twisted violently as they attempted to pull back, to sever the connection before it spread. Too late. Across the station, sensors lit up with new contacts as other ships, other species, brushed against the resonance and felt it, felt each other. The galaxy was listening now, and the keepers were running out of time.
The resonance did not stop at Helios 9. It spilled outward like a shock wave that wasn't measured in energy, but in awareness, slipping through subspace channels and CARM relays, riding the same pathways the galaxy used for trade and war and diplomacy. Ships passing within a dozen light minutes of the station felt it first, crews pausing mid-command as a strange warmth brushed their senses, a fleeting but unmistakable sense that someone else was there with them. Not watching, not judging, present. Panic followed seconds later as instruments spiked and long-buried myths crawled out of cultural memory, but the feeling lingered even as fear tried to smother it. The keepers reacted with fury. The warped starlight around the station collapsed inward, compressing into tighter, more aggressive geometries as they attempted to isolate the source of contamination. Gravitational shear ripped across Helios 9, tearing loose external structures and sending debris spinning into the void. Inside the shattered council chamber, Mercer braced himself against a bulkhead as the floor tilted violently beneath his feet. Salith hovered close, their light flaring in protective pulses, instinctively stabilizing the air currents around him. The station AI's voice degraded into clipped fragments as processing nodes failed one by one. Multiple hull breaches, power grid destabilizing, evacuation probability declining. The council chair screamed orders no one could follow, protocol dissolving under the weight of reality. Species that had never fought side by side found themselves doing exactly that, claws and manipulators and limbs of every configuration gripping handholds together as gravity lurched. Mercer felt the resonance deepen, no longer something he was actively pushing, but something self-sustaining, feeding on the simple act of beings refusing to face annihilation alone. The keepers struck again, this time not at the station, but at the resonance itself. A crushing silence fell, an absence so profound it felt like a vacuum inside Mercer's skull. For a terrifying moment, the connection faltered, the warmth dimming as if snuffed out by a cosmic hand. Salith cried out, their form flickering wildly as the keepers attempted to sever the bonds, forming across species lines. "This is how they end it," Salith transmitted, anguish bleeding through. "They isolate each of us until we forget what connection feels like." Mercer forced himself to breathe through the pain, through the creeping numbness that whispered surrender would be easier. He thought of Earth again, of disasters where communication failed, and people died not because help didn't exist, but because it never arrived in time. He refused to let that happen here. He reached out blindly, gripping the wrist of a nearby counselor, an avian species whose feathers bristled in alarm at the contact. The counselor froze, instinct screaming violation, but Mercer didn't pull away.
He met their eyes, fear mirrored by something else, recognition. The resonance flared weakly in response, a spark reigniting in the suffocating silence. All around the chamber, similar moments unfolded as others followed the impulse, tentative touches bridging cultural taboos in the face of extinction. The keepers recoiled, the silence cracking as the resonance surged back, stronger for having been nearly lost. Outside, the warped starlight shuddered, fractures racing through the impossible geometries as if the universe itself protested the strain. The keeper's voice returned, no longer unified, no longer calm. This pattern must not propagate. It destabilizes compliance. Mercer laughed, breathless and raw. That's the point. Salith's light surged, their form expanding as they drew strength from the growing web of connection. They addressed the keepers directly, their voice carrying not just through translators, but through the resonance itself. You taught us fear to keep us small. You mistook isolation for order. This is what we were meant
To become connected, united. Mercer felt it ripple through him, a pulse that traveled from his chest into every limb, carrying with it not only Salith's presence, but the faint, scattered echoes of every human, every alien, every observer on Helios 9 who had dared to touch, to reach, to hold in the face of impossibility. Around them, the council chamber dissolved into controlled chaos as beings previously forbidden by culture or instinct to make contact began forming chains, touching, linking, grounding each other. The resonance grew exponentially, weaving a tapestry of awareness and defiance that the keepers could not ignore. Their geometries outside warped violently, attempting to suppress the network, but every effort only amplified it. Each touch, each human instinctive reach created feedback loops the keepers could not calculate or contain. Mercer, sweating, bleeding from minor fractures sustained when the station lurched under the keeper's pressure, felt Salith's light brush against his hands, a gesture of trust and understanding he could barely comprehend. You can feel it too, they transmitted, a vibration through the connection. It is terrifying, but possible. He nodded, even though they could not see him. Yes, yes, it is. He realized then, with a clarity that terrified him, that the Keeper's true weapon was not firepower, not annihilation, not rules. They were counting on inertia, on compliance, on fear to keep civilization small, fractured, predictable. Humanity had never been small. Humanity had never complied. That instinct, stubborn, reckless, relentless, was exactly the variable the Keepers could not anticipate. The outer hall groaned as the station bucked under spatial distortions, debris impacting with thunderous force, yet Mercer remained rooted, guiding the human-initiated network of connection, amplifying its intensity. Salith's form stabilized completely, radiant and structured, and for the first time their voice carried awe rather than panic. We are more than we believed. The Keeper's countermeasure arrived, a pulse of energy that warped the station's interior, bending gravity, snapping lights, tearing doors from their frames. Alarms became screams, sensors fried, life support fluctuated. Every being in the chamber struggled to maintain equilibrium, some thrown violently across the deck, some pressed into consoles. Mercer gritted his teeth, refusing to let go. Every human, every alien willing to follow, amplified the bond with his presence, bridging fear with determination. Outside, the impossible shapes of the Keepers trembled as they encountered a force that could not be quantified, a power not of energy, but of choice, connection, recognition, presence. The Keepers recoiled, uncertainty creeping into what they had assumed would be absolute control. The warping starlight faltered, bending and breaking apart in patterns that suggested hesitation, adaptation, flawed analysis by a civilization used to domination through compliance.
Mercer felt his mind touch Salith's in ways that words could never capture. Together, they could feel the Keeper's intention, their immense patience, their frustration at an evolutionary line they had underestimated. And then came the revelation, the twist that would ripple through every system on Helios 9 and eventually the galaxy. The Keepers were not invincible. They had never faced a species willing to defy fear, to defy taboos, to act with deliberate, compassionate intent under absolute threat. Humans. Their instinct to reach out, to touch, to act beyond protocol, beyond fear, was a variable the Keepers had never calculated. Mercer laughed aloud despite the chaos, the sound raw, human, irrepressible. They assumed isolation, he shouted over the groaning metal. They assumed fear. They assumed we would obey, but we don't. Every link strengthened. Every touch reinforced Salith's coherence. Every shared heartbeat added to a network of living defiance that the Keepers could not sever. And just as the station's hull bucked violently under another distortion, Salith's light flared beyond its previous limits, sending a pulse outward that reshaped the warped starlight, bending it back toward the void, back toward order on terms the Keepers did not define. For a fraction of a second, silence, not the absence of sound, but the recognition of impossible victory. Then the station lurched violently, sending Mercer crashing into a console. Lights flickered, systems flaring one last time before emergency power stabilized sections of the deck. Around him, beings staggered, dazed but alive. Salith hovered, radiant, fully coherent. The resonance persisted, now self-sustaining, a network that could survive short disruptions because it had been anchored not in protocol, but in choice. The Keepers had withdrawn, their presence receding like a tide beaten back by a force they could not understand. The distorted stars outside the viewport slowly realigned, leaving Helios 9 battered, scarred, but intact. Mercer's chest heaved, adrenaline and awe mingling as he struggled to catch his breath. His hands, still tingling from the connection, traced the faint shimmer of residual resonance left by Salith. Around him, humans were helping aliens to their feet, shared touches that had once been unthinkable, now necessary for survival. The council chair, pale and trembling, finally spoke, voice hoarse. What just happened? Mercer smiled weakly, exhaustion heavy in every movement. What just happened? He gestured at Salith, at the restored council chamber, at the humans holding hands with the once taboo Aeralis. We showed them that connection isn't weakness, it's power. Salith pulsed in agreement, light rippling over their form. Humans understand that in a way the galaxy rarely does. Fear can't bind us, taboos can't stop us, and no one, not even the Keepers, can control what we choose to do for each other. But the victory was not complete. As Mercer exhaled and allowed himself a brief moment of relief, a low-frequency vibration thrummed through the hull, felt more than heard. Sensors screamed again, alerting systems that had barely recovered. The Keepers were returning. They had not given up, and this time they were not alone.
The vibration rolled through Helios 9 like the heartbeat of a planet, low and insistent, forcing every conscious being to stop and feel it reverberate through bone, scale, tentacle, and gaseous form. The Keepers were not merely returning, they were advancing, accompanied now by secondary presences, smaller entities, satellites of observation, creatures long hidden at the edges of subspace, drawn to the unfolding anomaly at Helios 9. Mercer staggered to the viewport, Salith's luminescence brushing his arms in steady reassurance. Beyond the shattered hull, the warped starlight formed patterns so complex that the mind rejected them, yet somehow perceived intent. The Keepers were calculating, they were strategizing, and for the first time, Mercer realized that they could fail.
Not because he or Saelith were stronger, not because human technology was sufficient, but because of what humans, and now the airless, could do together. The resonance network had grown while the keepers withdrew, and it pulsed with a life of its own. Small touches multiplied into chains across the station, a human hand steadying a robotic engineer, an avian counselor bracing a mollusk diplomat, a humanoid alien pressing fingertips to another's energy-sensitive skin. Every contact amplified the field, making it impossible for the keepers to isolate any single node. Mercer's lungs burned, but he forced himself to move through the chamber, guiding, linking, touching, repeating the same motion that had begun everything. Saelith's was entered his mind again, sharper now, less hesitant. They are testing us, pushing boundaries we have never crossed. They expect fear, they expect compliance, but we do not yield. Mercer nodded, words useless in the chaos. Around him, the human crew, exhausted but instinctively determined, began broadcasting the resonance outward through every communication channel available, feeding every nearby ship, every nearby station into the network. The galaxy itself was now vibrating with connection, a signal the keepers had never anticipated. One of the counselors, shaking, tentacles trembling, asked aloud, voice cracking with disbelief, Why is it working?" Mercer allowed himself a brief grin, exhaustion pressing heavy on his spine. Because we don't obey fear. Because touch isn't weakness, it's choice. Because empathy cannot be modeled, cannot be predicted, cannot be controlled. The keepers responded with a force that slammed into the station violently, hull plating buckling, gravity fluctuating in chaotic pulses that threw dozens of beings across the deck. Yet the resonance held. Mercer felt it anchor him, thread him through every other conscious being participating. Every shiver, every heartbeat, every pulse reinforced the field. Saelith expanded slightly, filling the chamber with radiant light that pushed back against the keeper's encroachment, stabilizing the environment enough that humans and aliens alike could rise from the deck. Then came the twist no one had anticipated. The keepers did not retreat as before. Instead, a fragment of their presence entered the chamber itself, manifesting as a visible distortion, a ghostly ripple in the very air that shimmered and coiled like liquid metal. Their voice, impossible to localize, seeped into minds simultaneously, cold and precise. "You are violating the natural order. All connection beyond the intended parameters will be destroyed." Mercer's chest tightened, muscles trembling as he felt every nerve alight with the impossibility of defiance. But Saelith pulsed against him, a vibrant affirmation of cohesion. The light pressed back, not violent, but commanding. "We will not be destroyed by your rules, not by your fear, not by isolation." The fragment moved, a tendril of incomprehensible logic, attempting to sever the network node by node. Humans instinctively reached, grasped, pressed, reinforced. Counselors did the same, despite cultural taboos. Saelith's voice transmitted, calm and commanding to every linked being. "Strengthen the bonds. Trust them. Do not yield to the pressure." Mercer felt every node, every heartbeat, every touch reinforcing the network, feeding it, making it grow beyond Helios 9, rippling into ships and stations that had once been merely observers. The keepers struggled, their methodical precision faltering under an entirely unpredictable variable. Choice. Real, emotional, reckless, stubborn choice. The fragment of their presence recoiled for an instant, and then something unimaginable happened. Another pulse, human in origin, surged from Mercer's chest, amplified through the resonance, and struck the fragment directly. It did not destroy it. It did not harm. It merged. For the first time, a human instinct, a touch, a choice, a willingness to act beyond fear, interfaced with the keepers themselves. A tendril of light, metallic and impossible, shivered, slowed, then aligned with the resonance. Saelith's voice flowed through the network. "They are perceiving, not as us, but with us." Mercer's own mind spun with the implication. Humanity had not only survived, humanity had begun to teach the Keepers something no other species had ever managed. Connection could be strength, vulnerability could be defiance, and choice could resist even the oldest, most absolute power in the galaxy. The counselor's chair's voice trembled, caught between awe and fear. They understand? Mercer's grin was weak but determined. They're starting to. Outside, the stars twisted, rippled, reformed, not violently this time, but deliberately, bending around the station, as if respecting the new order. The Keepers were not gone, far from it, but they were listening, they were learning, and Mercer knew, deep in his marrow, that the galaxy would never be the same. Just as he exhaled, ready to collapse into relief, the station shuddered violently. Something had breached the outer defense perimeter. A ship, massive and unregistered, appeared beyond the viewport, pulsing with energy that mirrored, but was not identical to, the Keeper's signature. Mercer's stomach dropped. They were not alone. The Keepers had allies, and this new force was not negotiating.
The ship hung beyond Helios 9 like a predator pausing before the kill, enormous, angular, and impossibly alien. Its hull shimmered with colors no human eye could name, surfaces folding and unfolding as if breathing. Mercer felt the resonance spike, Saolith's light flaring in immediate recognition. The new entity was not a Keeper, it was something else, older, deliberate, and unrelenting. Every system in the station screamed warnings, gravitational fields fluctuating, structural integrity compromised, power surges threatening total collapse. Yet amidst the alarms, Mercer noticed something human in the chaos. Calm, focus, instinctive coordination. Hands reached across consoles, across species, linking fingers, claws, tentacles, and energy tendrils. The network of connection, born in desperation and fear, was expanding outward faster than the station could fail. Saolith pulsed, guiding, feeding, anchoring, every flicker of light resonating with the humans' courage, their willingness to act, to touch, to choose. The ship shifted, its pulse slamming toward Helios 9, a wave of non-corporeal pressure that felt like infinity pressing down on every nerve. The Keepers had not called it in. It had come of its own accord, perhaps drawn by the resonance. Mercer's mind reeled. We're not just fighting one entity anymore. This is a test, a demonstration, or a selection. Saolith's luminescence sharpened, an anchor in the storm. Do not flinch. Do not recoil. Let them see what choice can do. Mercer nodded, though sweat ran down his temples. He gritted his teeth and pressed forward, extending a hand to a nearby technician, a human engineer with eyes wide in panic. "Trust me," he said simply. She grasped his hand without hesitation, linking into the growing chain. Around them, the chamber erupted in a similar ballet of instinct. Alien counselors, humans, and other species, each previously taught fear and isolation, connected, forming a lattice of presence so potent it reverberated outward, brushing the alien ship with waves of emotion, recognition, and stubborn defiance. The new ship responded instantly. Its hull rippled, tendrils of energy probing the station's resonance, attempting to sever nodes, crush minds, disrupt connection. The Keepers had allies trained to manipulate coherence itself. Mercer felt the pressure surge into his chest, pure force bending his lungs, muscles, and nerves like wire. Pain manced through him, sharp and insistent. He stumbled, almost losing grip on the technician's hand. Then Saolith's light struck him, a warm, penetrating pulse that steadied, grounded, reinforced. "You are not alone," they transmitted. He tightened his grip, teeth clenched, and pushed the pain into focus. "We are not alone." Around the station, similar moments multiplied. Each human instinct to act, each alien curiosity overcome by courage, amplified the resonance. The alien ship's tendrils recoiled, confused, unable to calculate the impossible variable. Deliberate empathy, the conscious act of connecting under threat. The keepers themselves surged again, their presence crashing into the station in anger, but something had shifted. Their once absolute authority was challenged, destabilized. Their protocols had never accounted for creatures that would choose connection over fear. Mercer's voice carried through the chamber, amplified by comms, raw and commanding, threaded with exhaustion and resolve. If you're out there, every being listening, every hand that can reach another, do it. We're stronger together. The humans obeyed instinctively. Engineers and medics, pilots and counselors, even security personnel tentatively extended hands across barriers, connecting not for protocol, not for survival, but because it was the right act in the face of annihilation. The resonance surged outward, brushing the alien ship with the first real sensation it had ever felt, recognition of another being as choice, as equal, as present. The keeper's response faltered, then splintered. Their tendrils of control retracted as the new ship's pulse began to destabilize their manipulation. Outside, warped starlight fractured, bending toward a new geometry that Mercer could not name but could feel in his chest. Awe, terror, possibility. Saelith pulsed again, brighter than ever, their light bridging gaps between species and humans alike. They transmitted one final thought before Mercer felt the first wave of clarity. You have changed the rules, forever. The keepers, the alien ship, every entity observing, recalculating, failing to predict the next move. Mercer exhaled, shaking from adrenaline, pain, and triumph. Around him, beings helped each other to their feet, connecting as if survival demanded it, even though victory was uncertain. But then, as the station hummed with tentative stability, a new vibration shivered through Helios 9. Not hostile, not threatening, a whisper of something else, something waiting, something the galaxy had never seen, arriving because humans had acted where fear demanded inaction. Mercer felt it in his chest. The final trial had begun.
The vibration spread through Helios 9 with a weight that pressed on every conscious mind, subtle yet overwhelming, as though the galaxy itself exhaled. The new entity, the massive, unregistered ship, hung beyond the viewport, its surfaces folding and unfolding with impossible precision. But now it paused. Mercer felt Saelith's pulse synchronize with his heartbeat, steadying him, grounding him, even as the station groaned from previous assaults. Around the chamber, humans and aliens alike braced, hands locked, forming a lattice of presence that vibrated outward, through space, through comms, through the very resonance that had first drawn the keeper's attention. This was no longer a fight of strength, no longer a battle of weapons. It was a test of will, of choice, of the fundamental principle that had always defined humanity, that the act of reaching out, of connecting, could defy what logic and fear demanded. The alien ship pulsed, projecting patterns Mercer could barely comprehend, immense arrays of energy seeking to analyze, subvert, and dominate the resonance. But every human and every alien who had touched, who had chosen to hold on, fed the network, amplified it, reinforced it. Mercer gritted his teeth, leaning forward, extending both hands to touch the nearest two beings, their nervous fear melting into recognition, into solidarity. "You cannot stop this," he said, voice raw, reverberating through comms and minds alike. "Because it is not yours to stop. It is ours." Saelith's light flared, responding to the wave of will, expanding outward beyond the station, threading through the network, touching every node, merging human courage with the coherence of a species that had never known touch, and now never could forget it. The unregistered ship pulsed again, this time its energy rippling through the resonance in sharp bursts. The station shuddered, panels cracked, air hissed from fissures in the hull. But the human instinct, the simple, irrational act of reaching out in fear and defiance, held firm. The keeper's presence, massive and ancient, began to waver, uncertain for the first time in millennia. Mercer felt it, an ancient intelligence confronted by a species unwilling to obey, unwilling to fragment,
unwilling to fear. And then the revelation hit him. The keepers had never encountered choice so unflinching, so deliberate, so conscious. Humanity's instinct to act, to connect, was a variable beyond prediction, beyond control, beyond their ancient calculus. The alien ship shimmered violently, then paused entirely. Its tendrils, no longer probing, now hovered in stasis, responding to the resonance rather than attempting to dominate it. The stars outside warped one last time, then settled into a steady, familiar geometry, as if space itself acknowledged the shift. Sialith's voice entered Mercer's mind, calm, radiant, and proud. They perceive what we are, not threats, not experiments, not prey. What we are capable of together. Mercer exhaled, trembling, allowing himself a moment of disbelief. Around him, the chamber erupted in cautious cheers, relief and wonder blending across species lines. Counselors, humans, and other beings touched one another instinctively, no longer bound by fear, by taboo, by cultural history. The resonance persisted, a living network of choice and connection that had redefined the rules of engagement with entities that had never known empathy. Mercer spoke aloud, voice raw, trembling, yet carrying through every calm and consciousness linked by the network. "Listen," he said, "remember this. We reached out when fear demanded we stay apart. We touched when we were told not to. We connected when the galaxy expected division. And because of that, we endured. We changed the rules." Sialith's light flared one final time, radiating warmth that touched every being in the chamber. They transmitted a simple thought to Mercer, a clarity he would carry for the rest of his life. "You have taught us. Not just you, humans. All of you." And they were right. The Keeper's presence withdrew, retreating into subspace, with patterns folding into themselves, recalibrating against an unknown future in which connection had become power. The alien ship followed, not in retreat, but in watchfulness, its intent unreadable, yet fundamentally altered. Mercer sank to the deck, hands still entwined with those around him, chest heaving, mind overwhelmed by exhaustion and awe. Around the station, the resonance continued, a soft hum threading through life, binding beings who had once feared touch, who had once avoided connection, into a network that would endure. Humanity had been underestimated, feared, dismissed, but now their instinct to reach out, to act with courage, to connect in defiance of fear, had reshaped the galaxy. Sialith's light pulsed gently against Mercer's chest one last time, a silent promise and acknowledgement. They survived because of touch. They survived because of humanity. And somewhere in the infinite expanse, ancient watchers recalculated. New variables had entered the equation. New rules had been written. And the galaxy would never be the same. Mercer exhaled, tears blurring his vision. They had endured. They had reached across fear, across millennia of taboo, and they had won. Not through weapons, not through technology, not through domination, but through the simplest, most dangerous act any species could commit. Choice, connection, touch, humanity. The resonance pulsed once more, steady, eternal, a reminder that fear was never absolute and that every being had the power to redefine the universe, one hand, one heartbeat at a time.